Big world adventures, the drama.
What's up with Zack?
I don't know. I've never seen him this worked up before.
He sounds like he's in some sort of trance or something.
Should one of us break him out of it?
You don't have to ask me
Put that hammer down now!
Fine.
Anyway, I think the reason Zack has gone crazy was because of
Twitter and YouTube.
Big Adventures.
Oh!
Should one of us try to talk to him?
Not me. I'm sure he'd say something just to piss me off again.
Twitter and YouTube.
Don't look at me!
Mike?
Yeah?
Why don't you and I try to snap him out of it?
Alright then.
The drama. Twitter.
Yo, Zack. You alright?
Ah! Who's there?
Relax, Zack. It's us. Are you feeling okay?
Oh, I guess so. Just as long as we don't delay our Big World Big Adventures review any longer than we need to, I'm good.
Well, you're in luck, because we're going to be talking about it today.
Thank goodness.
Aren't you going to cue the intro?
Actually, no. Since it wouldn't be fair for only 3 of us to do so, why not have all 5 of us tackle the movie together?
Wait a second. Did I hear you correctly?
You mean all 5 of us are going to be partaking in this review?
Yeah, so instead of the Gandalf Talks intro we used up to school raise, we're going to do something different. Mostly because I accidentally left our CDs in a car for too long and all our music has metamorphosed into Best of Queen compilations. Don't ask me how that works. Anyway, here's our new intro. It's safe to say that 2018's been a very interesting year for Thomas and My Little Pony fans. To start with, a former member of both fandoms whom we're going to leave nameless was outed as a pedophile, shocking Thomas fans, bronies, and friends of this particular person who felt betrayed by him and cut him out of their lives for good. Deservedly so if you ask me, but that's another story. Meanwhile, on the Thomas side of things, Mattel is making merchandise as cheap as possible. For example, there is the iconic wooden railway range being discontinued in favor of Thomas wood. Long story short, the engines were unfinished, certain parts of the characters were left unpainted where they were supposed to be, and that's before we even mention how some characters look like gutted fish. I could go on about Mattel's poor marketing strategies and how lazy the merchandise looks when compared to 2010 5 years ago, but that's a subject for another day. Maybe.
What we are here to talk about is the recent reboot of the TV series, starting with its 8-minute movie, Big World Big Adventures. And my goodness did this film divide the Thomas fanbase even further than before. A fair number of fans have disowned the movie, calling it an insult, a travesty, a disgrace to Audrey's vision or whatever. And bear in mind, these are the same people who will willingly accept Henry's Force, Rescue to the Rescue, and anything from Season 5. Plus a certain infamous movie that shall remain nameless for now. Then there were people like us who decided to keep an open mind and see the film for ourselves, not giving any regards to any negative comments from online users. And personally speaking, I thought it was a lot of fun. Not without its flaws, I'll admit, but still a lot of fun.
I had fun watching the film too, Mike. For anyone bashing the film for no reason, why in the name of StarClan are you still bothering at all? This reboot is here to stay, folks. I may still love the Railway series. Heck, some of my favourite stories came from there, and characters too, including one who is my character crush. But you must give the movie a fair chance, otherwise, you don't know what you were missing.
I have to admit, I was kind of worried about what the outcome of the film would bring once it's released, but while I find some scenes quite funny and enjoyable for me, there were some that, well, you know, There are a couple more things that I wish to share, but we'll get to that later. Oh boy, I can't wait, I'm so excited! Haha!
Unfortunately, with me, I don't even know what to feel with the movie. I'll admit it's better than what I originally thought it would be, but at the same time, it wasn't very good either. Better than those awful pieces known as Calling All Engines, Misty Island Rescue, and Day of the Diesels. But it's still way below the specials known as King of the Railway, Tale of the Brave, The Great Race, and especially both The Adventure Begins and Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure.
I sort of agree with Matt here. I mean, I do consider this special okay. I'm just saying that I still think that The Adventure Begins climbs to the top of my list.
It's just there. That's the short story. The long story is, well, let's find out.
Yay! Let's get started!
Brace yourselves, folks. It's gonna be a long tale.
I like how the movie begins almost immediately with Gordon picking on Thomas and Little Blue Engine getting his own back by coupling trucks to smelly fish behind his express. Anyway, after tricking Gordon, Thomas meets an Australian race car named Ace who inspires our #1 engine to go and see the world. Thomas follows him on a ship to Africa, which gets everyone on Sodor to worry about him.
And what better way to show it than with a song?
When in Africa, Thomas loses Ace when the race car goes off without him and is forced to take a goods run through the desert. There, he meets up with another newcomer, Nia. Unlike Ace, she decides to stick with Thomas throughout his trip, and Thomas also starts to learn about Africa's culture.
But throughout the journey, Thomas likes to think himself as the first engine to travel around the world, but in his eyes, maybe the first and only engine. Because Nia tagging along with him seemed to think it was slowing him down. But let's face it, he couldn't climb up that hill without her help, right? And just when he was about to set sail for another country, she still tags along with him, much to his dismay and disappointment.
The ship takes Thomas and Nia to Brazil, and the two engines take a trainload of coffee through the Amazon rainforest up to San Francisco. Along the way, Ace joins up with them and convinces Thomas to take things free and easy, as he puts it. By the time they reach America, Ace convinces Thomas to take half of the train and go a different route towards the salt flats, which lands him into trouble. Eventually, they get help from an engine called Bo and some horses. Thomas drops off Ace at the salt flats and continues on his way to San Fran to apologize to Nia. He finds out from one of the diesel shunters that she went on a boat to China. Thomas takes the next boat to China and meets up with his old friend Young Bao from...
Are you okay, Mike?
I'm not gonna say it. I'm not gonna say the name of it. Ever since our JBS review, every time I brought up that particular special, I need to make the joke. That's not happening. I'm not gonna do it.
It's alright, Mike. Just take a few deep breaths, okay?
Okay. Where was I? Oh yeah, a Chinese diesel tells Thomas that Nia is heading towards Himalayas. Nia was still cross with the Little Blue Engine about what happened in Arizona, but both of them nearly have an accident and Young Bao came to their rescue. See? The Great Roller Show characters weren't pointless marketing toys after all! Nia forgives Thomas about what happened, and the two of them make it across Asia and Europe back home to Sodor.
Upon arrival on Sodor, Nia reveals she couldn't go home again. Ultimately, she is welcomed to the railway by all of the other engines, and is allowed to stay.
Throughout all this, there's a subplot with Sir Topham Hatt. It starts when Emily points out that Thomas has taken a ship out of Sodor, and he decides to go after the blue tank engine after realizing he inevitably sent Thomas off on a wild goose chase. This leads to some funny bits like the camel ride through the desert and flying on a plane over the jungle. Then it ends with Sir Topham Hatt on the ship that just so happens to have Ace on it? That's a weird ending.
Why would they end the movie on that note when not even bother answering how I got back to Sodor in season 22? That's just cheap. Cheap, I say.
Yeah, I could only imagine what would happen if the Fat Controller ever did manage to return home. I could only imagine him snapping so hard at Thomas like he did back in Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, when he thought that he was trying to kill Orion with that dynamite. I mean, come on, isn't that something we were all thinking?
I thought the international episodes would explain what happened during that time. and said I was wrong.
Now that is irony right there. We leave unanswered questions in season 21, and yet the movie just leaves you asking what happened next. What were they thinking? Back to the movie, there's not a lot to say story-wise. Just Thomas and later Nia going around the world. Not exactly Jules Verne, is it? Because there's a lot of focus on Thomas, Nia, and Ace, plus Sir Topham Hatt, what's going on back on Sodor? All we know is that Mr. Percival took charge during Sir Topham's absence, but that's it.
It's a perfectly good plot gone to waste, if you ask me. Just like how Season 21 got cut short, and its previously established plots never saw the light of day.
Speaking of, while Mr. Percival was left in charge of the Northwestern Railway, who was in charge of the narrow gauge line? Fergus Duncan?
And who's left in charge of the small railway? Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, I know we're reading too deep into this, but we need answers, damn it!
Goodness knows how the narrow gauge engines would have tackled things on their own without their controller. That would be an interesting story on its own.
At least with Dowager Hat's busy day, it made sense that Dowager Hat would look after things while her son was sick. And in the end, things worked out okay. Once she got a bit of help from Emily, that is.
I've also done an analysis journal on DeviantArt to theorize how long it took Thomas and Nia to travel the world. 6 months, give or take a few weeks. Just makes you wonder how Sodor managed to avoid confusion and delay in his absence.
And just think how Annie, Clarabelle, and Percy would have taken all this. Percy was already worried at the beginning, which is more in character this time than he was in Genevieve on Sodor, and Annie and Clarabelle would have been torn inside, knowing the engine was somewhere they couldn't even guess.
Even with that, surely someone was helping out on the Farquhar branch line. I assume, at least.
Oh, Rosie perhaps?
I don't know. Doesn't she technically work at Vickerstown?
She was just the first one that came to my head.
Maybe she could have been asked to help out on the branch line after they discovered he's missing. I mean, if you remember Journey Beyond Sodor, when Thomas was missing, they did manage to ask James to run his line, so I'm pretty sure they would have gotten someone to look after the line and Annie and Clarabelle.
Maybe Stanley or Charlie looked after the yachts. I don't know.
Are we overthinking this too much?
Oh, sorry, Zack. I got a bit excited.
It's fine. Anyway, what else is there to say about the story that we haven't already?
Honestly, there's not too much to go on with BWBA's story. Basically, it's the Thomas equivalent of Around the World in 80 days, and that's it. Heck, the film itself is clocked in at exactly 80 minutes.
Coincidence? I think not!
Well, if there's not a whole lot left to say about the story, let's move on to the major players of the film. Starting with Thomas, who, as you'd expect by now, is our lead character, finally living off his dream to see the world.
I didn't think he was actually going to leave Sodor. As a kid, I assumed he just wanted to get out of the yard.
In the Reverend Audrey's forward message in Thomas the Tank Engine, it said, and I quote, he wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. It seems as though Mattel took that see the world bit literally and decided to have Thomas explore other countries. Plus, in hindsight, it makes sense now why they included the international engines from that special whose name I'm not gonna mention.
Regardless, I have to say, Thomas was portrayed pretty well, though I did like his Jenny Beyond Sodor characterization more. I really rooted for the little guy in the film.
I'm not too sure if I already said this earlier, but I didn't really think he was actually going to do it. I'm pretty sure he gave up on that dream after he was given his very own branch line and his coaches as well. After all, isn't that what the Reverend portrayed him as?
I guess Mattel took things literally, but I didn't think that was a bad thing.
Maybe so. But then again, was it even meant to be realistic to begin with?
Remember, these engines talk and have very clear facial expressions. You can't expect realism based on that logic.
Fair enough.
Now we move on to Nia, the orange African tank engine that Thomas met on his way to Dar es Salaam.
She's a real sweetheart in this special, as well as bubbly, energetic, and full of charisma. I've really enjoyed her throughout the special, and it seems like she's a sister to Thomas, honestly. Reminds me slightly of Thomas's bond with Lily in sort of the modern years.
Even then, Nia has also become one of the biggest base-breaking characters introduced in the whole franchise. There are many reasons for it, and they will be discussed in due time, namely in the discussion of Season 22.
Now Nia is someone that I quite find okay, but I heard a lot of people complaining that she seems to look like a narrow gauge engine because of the way she was built. But truth be told, that isn't really the case. I found out that she was built as a KUR-ED1/EAR11 class. Upon discovering this, it seems that she runs on a different kind of scale of track. So I kinda get that Mattel just milks the idea of having her to run on the same track as Thomas. So like I said, was it even meant to be realistic to begin with?
If it were, you'd have a railway documentary, and that's not as interesting to watch.
And the engines wouldn't even talk, let alone have personalities or anything.
Is it any wonder that when Ian McHugh said if fans want realism, they should give up on Thomas and go watch a train documentary in one article, fans got understandably upset and began to hate him?
I've heard a few people compare Nia to Ashima from that special from 2 years ago, and honestly, I don't see it. I mean, in BWBA and Season 22, Nia was portrayed as inquisitive, fun-loving, and throughout her appearances in Season 22, she has become one of the most well-developed newbies this season. And as for Ashima, look, I don't mean to offend anyone who likes her, but she's pretty bland when it comes to her character.
Yeah, logging locos have more personality than Ashima.
Uh-oh.
Hold me! Here it comes!
Idea.
Zack!
Yes?
You take that back about Ashima! Don't you dare consider that those three friggin' idiots have more personality than her! Ashima is far more loved and has more character than the logging locos will ever have, goddammit!
Guys?
Yes, Rachel?
Stop arguing like children! It's hard work for Mike and I to play Team Dad and Team Mom all the time.
Yeah, you can't expect you guys to bicker over pretty much anything under the sun and not expect one of us, or in this case, both of us, to be okay with it.
And besides, Matt's anger scares me sometimes.
What? I'm just speaking my mind.
Huh, yeah, right. You just wanted a chance to insult Ashima.
Listen, you guys, it's okay for you guys to disagree about Ashima. Matt, you have your reasons for liking her, and Zack, you have your reasons for disliking her.
Yeah, what Mike said. So can we just agree to disagree and move on with the next character, please?
Alright then.
Good. Now that we got that out of the way, let's move on to talking about the rest of the cast.
Next on our list is Ace the race car from Australia.
One of the more interesting things about Ace is that he's the first road antagonist exclusive to a special. Sure, there have been off-rail antagonists in the TV series, such as George the Steamroller, Bullshode the Barge, and the Horrid Lorries, but they're more or less exclusive to the TV series, or in George and Bullshode's case, the Railway series.
Just off the bat, that Ace is from my home turf intrigued me before watching the special. His character really delivered here. He's cocky and free-spirited, but that is also his downfall. He's not loyal to Thomas at all, and what one would call an idealistic friend. Unfortunately, people do fall into these traps, and the same thing happened with Thomas to Ace.
Ace is, well, he's a bad influence on Thomas. Plain and simple. And he isn't exactly one of the most likable characters out there either. He's brash, cocky, and whatever else there is to say about him and his personality. Need I go on?
Yeah, even I have to express my thoughts about Ace. Now, the reason why I have a problem with him throughout the special is because he's just another typical character who puts ideas into Thomas's head. In fact, he was the main reason why Thomas left Sodor in the first damn place! And it was rumored that he was supposed to play as some kind of villain. Well, for me, I would personally think that he is. After all he ever did was persuade Thomas to follow him all over the world so that he could put his friends and home behind him. That stupid yellow bugger.
Ace is a pretty interesting antagonist for the film. You may not know it just from watching it, but he's very subtle in his antagonism. He's practically Thomas's shoulder devil to Nia being the shoulder angel. You know Kronk's angel and devil from the Emperor's New Groove? That's what's happening right there.
Kinda like Pinkie Pie's shoulder devil and angel in the Saddle Row review if you ask me.
Our last major character on the list is Sir Topham Hatt himself.
Sir Topham Hatt was finally given justice after his performance in Journey Beyond Sodor and the other special I won't name for Mike's sake.
It's okay, Rach. You can say it if you want. I'm just saying whenever I say it, I need to make that joke I started with in our JBS review. It's like how when Gondar talks about his history with Michelangelos, he always uses that clip from The Bill.
His name's Nigel. Dr. Nigel Botterill.
Ah, I see. That's fair enough. Anyway, Sir Topham has actively gone out to look for Thomas and left Mr. Percival in charge of the Northwestern Railway. By the way, did anyone get a classic series vibe from that? I mean, Sir Topham ran the Scarlet Railway from seasons 4 to 7.
Honestly, I wouldn't blame Topham if you felt overworked by the time season 7 ended. You think you're overworked on your line, Duncan? Try running 2 railways at the same time.
Good one! Who was I? Oh yes, Topham. He really showed determination to get Thomas home, even if it meant riding a camel, getting Carly to lift him into the ship, and going through various crowds just to get him back.
I have to agree with what Mike and Rachel are trying to explain. Him trying to find Thomas was actually quite funny. He kind of reminds me of Sylvester from Tweety's High Flying Adventure, when he tries to catch the hero whilst travelling worldwide. I can see the similarities from both films really. Can anyone else see that?
Ultimately, the film ended before we could find out if Sir Topham Hatt ever got back home again. And when we get to season 22, he's already back again. I mean, what the hell? Shouldn't the international episodes have focused on finding Sir Topham Hatt and bringing him back home? Damn it! It should have happened!
That was my guess, Matt. But apparently I was dead wrong. The international episodes were its own thing.
And why is Thomas allowed to travel the world for half of season 22? That's just poor storytelling right there, honestly.
We'll talk about that when we get to season 22 proper.
No doubt there's a lot we can say about those episodes then.
Damn straight.
As for everyone else in the movie, it's not a whole lot to say about them individually.
Not really, but we do see a few new faces, including the car's Ace races, Kwaku from Africa, Bo and that other engine from Arizona, Nally from San Francisco, and the Chinese diesel electric engine.
Can I also mention that a few engine characters in a few of the countries are actually recolored versions of some of the Sodor engines?
That's weird. I mean, I know we get engines from other countries ending up on Sodor once in a while, but Britain-based engines in other countries? I don't know what to say. Maybe they did a trade. Who knows?
Maybe they just didn't have the time nor money to redesign the foreign engines to make them look different. It's kind of like how they were going to film Gordon Goes Foreign for a season 3 episode. They were originally going to use Henry to mock the foreign engine, but it turns out that episode didn't happen due to the obvious fact that the storyline would be confusing to children. So I'm pretty sure that just sums it up really.
It's possible. Heck, we even see purple and gray recolors of Henry in a few India-based episodes.
A purple Henry? Oh no! Chris Ed Green won't be happy.
I know what you mean.
Okay. That was unsettling.
What's next? That background engine becoming a toy before it even becomes a character?
Well, with Rosie repainted red recently, probably not. Goodness, it's a tongue twister.
Alright, let's move on to the musical numbers, beginning with Where in the World is Thomas?
This one is just hilarious, and there's a ton of references here. Thomas's special letter, Thomas goes to breakfast, as he takes the plunge. Oh, I remember that audio story a while back.
Yeah, it was fun to work on.
I enjoyed that too.
There's even a reference to the David Bowie song Space Oddity, when Percy has that fantasy sequence of Thomas in outer space.
Imprisoned in a steel world.
Be lost in outer space.
Fat controller to Major Thomas. Come in, Major Thomas. Stop messing around. You're causing confusion and delay.
And there's also some funny jokes with Dowager had about the gondola.
Or in Venice on a gondola. Don't be preposterous. He's a tank engine. He can't fit in a gondola. Well, he could if it was a rather large gondola.
Do gondolas even come in that size?
I have no idea! There's also references to the CGI specials and the episode Thomas's Shortcut.
There's even a reference to Biscuit Island Rescue of all specials.
Or found a secret tunnel to some island that's unknown. That doesn't make any sense. How could there be an island around here that's unknown? What if it was always covered in mist? Oh, that sounds very mysterious.
Misty Island. I think that part was a jab towards the island.
That reminds me of...
No.
You got injured last time you brought it up, Zack, as I recall, and you don't want to get hurt again, do you?
Good call, sis. Good call.
So, what's the next song?
Wake up!
Here's your answer, Matt.
Yeah, I know.
Wake Up has grown on me after listening to it a few times. As for the context of the song itself, Nias suggested that the trucks sing as it's a long way to the destination. I guess African trucks are very musical. Far cry from the trucks on Sodor, especially since their songs are about mocking the engines.
Yeah, remember Pop Goes the Diesel and Toad Stands By?
Not to mention Scruffy sounded off key. Or maybe that was just Angela singing, I don't know.
As I recall, George Carlin gave him a Brooklyn or Bronx accent. I got nothing against Angelus, but unlike Starr, Carlin, or even Baldwin, he really can't carry a tune to save his life.
All of us no use at all, thinks he very clever, says that he can manage us, that's the best joke ever.
I meant no disrespect, you understand.
Takes me back to being a kid again.
Ah, those songs were catchy.
It always seems like the Thomas specials have good music that'll get stuck in your head. Legend of a Lost Treasure, Journey Beyond Sodor, The Great Race. Yeah, I said that.
Such as, Will You, Won't You?
I can't really deny the songs in The Great Race were catchy too, Zach.
Bendazenda Ule. It's an African lullaby and that's it. Not even a minute.
It's a sweet sounding song. It shows that the animals, engines, and rolling stock in Africa have a close connection. I love these types of scenarios.
For some reason, these songs really remind me of The Lion King. Maybe it's the African influence, I'm not sure.
The next song we're going to talk about was one that was used twice actually. Once during Thomas's trip to Brazil, and again during his and Nia's journey back to Sodor.
It's called We're Friends, and is a really nice duet between Thomas and Nia, especially in the UK version. Don't get me wrong, I do like both John Hassler and Joseph May voicing Thomas, but in my opinion, Hassler is better with the songs, while May is better at emoting.
I just honestly don't get that song. I mean, I did try to listen very carefully to understand the words and to what the song meant, but it still meant bloody nothing. I was like, what the hell is this piece of garbage? I'm sorry, but the song just isn't growing on me, because for me, nothing in that song seems to make any logical sense.
Ouch, Cameron, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? I really like this one myself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel, but it just isn't the kind of song for me.
Anyway, another thing I feel we should bring up is that Nia has a different actress when it comes to singing, like with Pinkie Pie, Rarity, and Twilight from My Little Pony. Not to mention Sweetie Belle in the first few seasons, and more recently, Scootaloo for some reason.
While Yvonne Grundy does the speaking voice for Nia, in this special, Patricia Kahiro does her singing voice. In fact, as far as I know, this is the first time in the series a character has a separate person doing the singing voices for both dubs. In the UK, Percy and Emily's singing voices are their respective American voice actors Christopher Raglan and Jules DeJong, as opposed to Nigel Pilkington and Teresa Gallagher. Wait a minute, I forgot about Marion. She's voiced by Olivia Colman, and Teresa does her singing voice. So no, that makes Nia the second character to have a separate person do their singing in both dubs.
Alright, shall we move on?
I suppose so. What's next? Yeah.
It's worth noting that when this song first came out, there was a bit of controversy surrounding a clip with Carlos. Remember him?
Oh! I remember him, Zach!
No, I meant from this special, Matt.
Oops, my bad.
For a moment, I thought Mr. Tamlet made that mistake again.
No, this is what I actually meant.
Oh, I see. A sun worshipper. We used to have proper sun worshippers in Mexico. And you know what their faces look like? This.
That bit being cut left me confused more than anything.
Perhaps it was for the best that scene was edited out.
Backlash was something they did not need at a time like this.
Nope, especially when they were getting enough of it already by this point.
Needless backlash, that is.
I wouldn't say needless, Rachel. There are many reasons Mattel has been getting backlash at the moment, and that's something you, Zach, Mike, and Cam should be aware of. I'm just saying.
I guess you do have a point there, Matt, but I meant was backlash for the wrong reasons. Anyway, what can we say about the song itself? It seems to be this special streamlining or hottest place in town, and it does help to show Ace's character a bit more, but I don't have too much else to say other than what we said about Ace during the character section.
It's insanely catchy, but
I've got nothing.
Both of you? Okay.
Moving on.
And that brings us on to the last number of the special, besides the reprise to We're Friends, Sometimes You Make a Friend.
This is the special's I Want to Go Home. It's incredibly beautiful and it hits all the sad chords it needs to. The realization you've made a genuine friend and now that friend is gone. You really feel for Thomas as he tries to find Nia again.
Now that song made sense to me because it starts to finally dawn upon Thomas that he forgets that friendship is what's helped him move forward. And I think that song is quite sweet and somewhat sad. Nearly brought a tear to my eye the first time I saw it even. I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. Too emotional for me.
When Thomas arrives on China looking for Nia, we see an orange female recolor of Edward. You may call it foreshadowing for the upcoming season. I call it oddly poetic.
I didn't even notice that when watching. Good call, Mike.
It's sort of a blinking you miss moment, I'll admit, but happens not long after Thomas arrives on China, and just before he meets up with Yong Bao.
Zach, anything you wish to say about the song?
Afraid I haven't much to say, really. One thing that stuck out to me, even when watching it for the first time, was that there was no narration from Mark Borrigan. It's just the visuals telling the story.
As I mentioned in our Season 21 retrospective, that was Mark's last season as narrator, as Season 22 will feature Thomas narrating for the first time. However, Mark will still be voicing a character in an episode the following season, as well as filling in Ben Forster's shoes as a new engine driver, Mr. Evans, so it's like Mark never left the show after all.
That's good to hear, though it is upsetting to know that Ben Foster died.
Yeah, it is upsetting.
Rest in peace, Mr. Perkins. We will never forget you.
Another strange thing we noticed is that Edward's back at Timoth again. He was there during Journey Beyond Sodor too. Didn't he go to Walsworth by now?
Mattel clearly have continuity problems with what they distribute. Can we at least ask for a little more consistency in the writing?
I wish that they did.
That bit was already clear from A Shed for Edward. Back to why he's at Timoth, there is one theory that's going through our minds right now. Perhaps Edward saw how upset Percy was during that morning and went to give him comfort. But that begs the question of who was comforting Philip.
Maybe one of the Diesels?
Like Mavis?
Or Paxton or Sydney. I know he's friends with them, considering a scene from Philip's number.
Yeah, I think Mavis was back up at the quarry, especially with Thomas gone.
Although that does leave me wondering, what about Toby? I mean, he's friends with Philip too. Remember Toby's new friend?
Maybe he did. Who knows?
Again, it would be nice if we knew what was going on back on Sodor during Thomas's absence.
Yeah, I kinda like the idea of what goes on, like a separate story set away from the main events. I have seen a lot of videos like that on YouTube before.
Then there's the scene with Thomas and Nia trying to get water in the rainforest. Anyone else notice that Nia has a female crew member?
Equality. How about that?
I'm glad they are finally stepping up their game and getting female crew members in. As a female Thomas by myself, it's nice to know that there's some minor characters to try and voice for feature fan dubs.
And now let's talk about a returnee for the special. No, it's not Yong Bao, it's Sam, that big green articulated tender engine that was ran into a wooden railway a few years back. If you're expecting someone like Boko and were disappointed, that's your fault for hyping yourself up like that.
While I wouldn't mind seeing Boko return in the CGI series at some point in future, do we really need him anymore? Not only has he been irrelevant since season 5, but after Hunt the Truck and seeing Edward's dynamic with Bill and Ben, as well as Timothy working with them since Tale of the Brave, there's really no need for him on the Wellsworth line.
Ah, Boko. What I wouldn't give to see Boko return to the series again. He is, after all, the true example as to why all diesel engines are not bad, especially with the way the Railway series portrays him in.
I do like Boko, but yeah, he would be needed somewhere else. Kind of like how Daisy was moved to Harwick from Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure onwards.
If it were up to me, and I would want to bring Boko back, I would have done one of two things. Have him stay on the mainland, but be a recurring visitor, kinda like how the Flying Scotsman has been since the 2016 special, or if he has to stay on Sodor, have him stationed at either Knapford or Vickerstown and work on the main line with the goods work. Sounds simple, right? He doesn't always need to look after the China Clay twins.
I'm good either way, as long as they write him as a good character like the Railway series did.
I'd go with the second one, honestly. Now, where were we again? Oh yeah, Sam. He doesn't really do much in his appearance, just passes by Thomas and Nia when they went to America.
In all honesty, I wasn't expecting Sam to return. He was basically a merchandise-only character for the Wooden Railway line back when it was still around and relevant, so Sam and Logan were among the last characters I would have expected to see return. So yeah, his cameo took me by surprise.
While it was nice to see Sam again as a one-time character appearance, the other character in America that Thomas had met was named Bio, and he was the kind of character that I found funny, and I took an immediate liking to. He somehow reminds me of the Prospector from Toy Story 2, except that he's not the evil guy, but instead rescues him after Thomas took a ride around the desert.
Speaking of America, did you guys know that 2 familiar characters from previous specials also appeared at one point?
Wait. Are you talking about Sailor John from Lost Treasure?
That's one of the 2 characters.
Well, like Sam, John was another character I wasn't expecting to see again, especially after the death of John Hurt. I assumed he died while in prison, but nope. Apparently he escaped Sodor for America.
That's a bit unfortunate. No, seriously. I hope the cops track him down. Puns! Not at a time like this.
And another familiar character to appear was Vinny.
Wrong Vinny, Mr. Tamlet.
Yeah, that Vinny is a lot more respectable than the Vinny we were referring to.
You know, it honestly astounds me that it took him this long to screw up in the episode. That's an achievement.
And like John, he had no lines and was merely a cameo.
Probably for the best if you ask me.
Huh, you're telling me?
Best if any were sent to the scrap pile like Hugo, Billy, Logging Locos, and that Indian engine whose name I forget.
Oh,
No,
dear
please
God,
don't! I'm not prepared for his anger again!
Zack, you wouldn't happen to be referring to her, would you?
Who?
Oh, come on. You know who I'm talking about. Don't deny it.
Maybe?
I'm gonna take that as a yes.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy? Caught in a landslide, no escape from reality.
So how can we sum up Big World Big Adventures, the movie? Is it really the worst thing in the world? I don't think so.
Well, overall, BWBA was an interesting experience to say the least. If you ask me, it's not even close to the worst special in existence, not when you have Carnal Engine's Misty on Rescue or Day of the Diesels to compare it to, and most certainly is not a new low for the series, especially when seasons 13 through 16 exist. However, I'd be lying if I'd call it one of the best specials ever. At this point, nothing will beat The Adventure Begins as the best special, and I doubt anything will beat Legend of Lost Treasure for a while either.
With the fandom, however, you'll be getting a large variety of answers on Big World, Big Adventures. Some call it the best ever, some call it very good, some call it average, some call it bad, and the rest call it the worst thing to ever happen to the franchise and refer to it as a new low. Yes, it's that divided. Currently, I'm in the group that call it average to bad. Again, it was better than I thought it would be, but at the same time, it was also not very good.
I personally really like this special. Is it as good as The Adventure Begins? No, but it's still good. I love Nia, Ace and Thomas bouncing off each other. The songs help to convey parts of the story well, and I think the Top Hat subplot is pretty funny. The ending needed work though.
I would say that this special is okay, but it nearly felt like it sort of spoofs the film Around the World in 80 Days. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'd lost hope for all songs except for one. But it nearly felt like that the last part of Thomas and Nia returning to Sodor was a bit rushed. And I do have to agree with the Fat Controller subplot being funny and all, but I guess you could say that this special is out of this world. What? Too soon?
To be honest, I think the format of hour-long specials is beginning to stagnate. Lost Treasure was where the specials really reached their peak, but those that came after just couldn't reach the highs. Even Journey Beyond Sodor fell flat at points, so really, maybe it's time they brought an end to the hour-long specials. After all, where else can Thomas go after having traveled the world? Travel the galaxy? I hope not.
But Thomas's worldwide journey is far from over, folks. Next time, we'll be looking at Season 22, the first official Big World Big Adventure season in the TV series.
And that episode is gonna be wild and crazy. Believe me when I say that. And also believe me when I say that the season and concept has divided the fan base more than anything previous.
I'm Zack Wanzer.
I'm Mike Nicholson.
I'm Matt St. Ange.
I'm Rachel Ravens.
And I'm Cameron Stevens.
And this has been the Emotions Corner.
Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me, for me.